Is the RED Komodo the greatest camera ever created? Today we're going to decide, and based on my personal experiences and my opinions, I will objectively decide, is the Komodo the best camera ever? And, whatever conclusion we meet is the correct one. If you disagree, that's okay. It's okay to be wrong. Okay, but seriously, hey y'all, welcome back to another video. Today, we are gonna talk about the RED Komodo. Now, this isn't gonna be a super scientific review. I kinda want this to be more of my real world, hands-on experience with this camera. Today, we're gonna run through the specs, my favorite things about the camera, my least favorite things about the camera, kind of where it's lacking a little bit, and then we'll talk about usability and real world usage. And at the end, we'll wrap it up with kind of a, should you buy this, who is this camera for, little conclusion section. And for the last couple of years, the main cameras that I've used have been the RED Gemini and the Sony A7siii. So those are kind of the pillars that I'm revolving around and forming my opinions around, which I think is pretty good because the Gemini is a full-fledged RED camera, has the color science, the dynamic range, all the things that RED users love. And then the A7siii is kind of at the top of that prosumer, really professional at this point. Camera level, it has freaking good dynamic range, autofocus, usability, image quality. But yeah, those two cameras are kind of my standards or my pillars, but let's talk about the RED Komodo. All right, first things first, the specs. So the Komodo has a 35mm sensor that can shoot 6K at up to 50 frames per second. From there, you can drop it down to 5K, 4K, or 1080, and you increase your max frame rate depending on how low you go. Maxing out at 48 frames per second at 5K, 60 frames per second at 4K, and 120 frames per second at 1080. RED reports 16 plus stops of dynamic range with this thing, which is literally ridiculous. And it also has a global shutter, so you're not gonna get any curved or diagonal lines when you're moving really fast past trees or pillars or anything like that. All your lines are gonna be straight. All right, now that that's over, let's talk about the pros. My favorite things about this camera. Pro number one is the price. I wanted to save this as the last pro, but I'm gonna be comparing this to the Gemini a lot during this list of my favorite things, so I wanted to get it out there that the Komodo comes in at $6,000, which is not cheap, but compared to the Gemini, which comes in at $19,500, it's relatively budget. So keep that in mind as we talk about the next couple of pros. The next one being the color science and the dynamic range. I'm kind of lumping those together because if you've ever used a RED camera, you'll know that there's nothing quite like it. I'm a huge fan of lighting and diffusing lighting and negative fill. I have some diffusion right here. Got a big window right there, but the REDs are the only cameras that I feel so confident literally just taking anywhere. And as long as you're not super duper underexposed or like blatantly overexposed, blasting light into it, you're gonna get a really beautiful image. And that's because of the color science and the dynamic range that these sensors have. Most of the filming that I've done on the REDs has been documentary style, run and gun B-roll. We didn't always have time to set up lights or diffusion or flag anything. A lot of the times we were just finding good compositions and shooting them. I love the A7siii, but when I'm shooting with it, to get the best image possible, I still need to make sure that I'm exposing 1.7 stops over with S-Log3 and diffusing any lights, any super bright highlights, making sure that I'm balancing the light really well. And I'm not saying you don't have to do that with the RED, but in my opinion, you can do it less and still get a pretty freaking stunning image that you're really happy with. Overall, what I'm trying to say is that I'm happy to report that the $6,000 RED Komodo does not greatly differ in the quality and the color science of the dynamic range compared to the Gemini. When I'm shooting with the Komodo, I get that same feeling, that same kind of empowerment to just shoot around, find good compositions, and know that I'm gonna get a really great image. All right, let's move on to the next pro, which is the small form factor. So obviously this camera is a tiny little cube. I really love the size because once it's built out with a V-mount battery and a monitor and the handles, it has a good bit of weight to get some really nice cinematic handheld, but it's not super heavy where it's killing your arms all day like the Gemini or a bigger camera would be. I find the cube design pretty dope. It's not like the Blackmagic or even the Sony where they're really long. It's literally just this little box and then you can build out around it. It feels good to hold, it feels good to shoot handheld footage, which is really my favorite type of footage to shoot at this point. And like I mentioned earlier, there's a crop factor when you turn down the resolution. All of RED's cameras do it. I generally find it a little bit annoying, but when it comes to usability and shooting run and gun style, it's actually really helpful. So this day when we were shooting the NASCAR event, I wasn't changing lenses a ton, and I needed to be able to get kind of lifestyle fans and NASCAR drivers and pit crew people doing stuff not super far away from me. And then I needed to quickly be like, oh, the cars are coming, but they're 200 yards away. Well, the good thing is I could flip into 2K and get this massive crop. I'm not sure exactly how much of a crop it is, but you can see here when I jump from 6K to 5K to 4K to 1080, it punches in a lot. And I found that to be super helpful for getting that reach when I was only probably on like a 50mm lens. It was looking like a 400mm lens. So I guess that could be a pro and a con. Two more pros and then we're moving on to the cons. The next thing is I actually really love the top screen. It has all the information that I need. It has RED's exposure tools, the little stoplights. I can hit record on the screen. I can see my image and I can change all my settings. You can set up some monitors to have RED control where I could just touch the small HD monitor and, you know, change all the settings. And that's how I generally would operate on the RED Gemini. But I've never shot like that on the Komodo. I've always used the external monitor as just that, a monitor, and then I can look down, change my settings real quick. It's nice to have them completely separated, and the touch screen is super responsive. For comparison, on my A7S III, I still need to reach over and use the physical buttons or have the flip screen, which is kind of off to the side, to change my settings. And I know it's a small thing, but all of these small things always add up. Sorry, I'm petting my dog. Speaking of monitors and changing settings, the RED Control app that RED made for the Komodo is literally ridiculous. Over the years, I've used Canon's app, Sony's app, which generally sucks, a new third-party app, Monitor Plus, which is really good, but none compare to the RED Control app. I can change every setting just from right here, from the low to medium to high quality, the ISO, the shutter angle, the frame rate. It's all like boop, boop, done. Boop, boop, done. Like, it's just done. And then I can monitor my image right there if I didn't want to put an external monitor on, or if I was running on a gimbal. This camera's small, the form factor is pretty small, so pretty much any gimbal I could put the Sony on, I could put the Komodo on, and then turn the monitor app on my phone and not have to use an external monitor or rely on the tiny little top screen. The only time I've had lag with the RED Control app is when I was on it and someone else was on it using it as a director's monitor, but that's generally not gonna happen. I don't know if you've ever used like monitor apps. They're not usually this good. So I was pretty hype on that. All right, let's talk about the cons. There's not that many, just a few things I kind of wish this camera had for its cinema camera label, and the first one is gonna be internal ND filters. If I had to put this camera in a grouping, the other cameras I would put in that group are the Sony FX6 and the Blackmagic Pocket 6K, both of which have internal ND filters. It's just kind of something I would really want if I was stepping up from the A7S III, and it makes it a little bit hard to upgrade to the RED, knowing that I could get the FX6, which is just a better version of this camera with more capabilities and internal NDs. The next one is autofocus. Now, RED did put autofocus in the Komodo, and you know what? It's their best try yet. It really isn't that bad. You can see here, it's a little bit slow. This is an older L series lens, so maybe not the best test to be running, but you can see as I move this controller, it tracks it pretty dang well and pretty dang quickly. It's just not as good as Sony's autofocus or Canon's autofocus. On the A7S III, I can literally tap someone's face. A little square dot will go on their eye, and I just know that they're gonna be in focus. It rarely fails. The RED's just a little bit slower. I mean, in the past, cinema cameras weren't generally supposed to have autofocus. I think that's stupid, and I think Mark II of the Komodo should have Canon level autofocus. I think that would take away any and all hesitations of making it my main camera. The industry's changing, and I don't think you have to be stuck to just using Alexa Minis and RED Monstros on set and then using DSLRs and mirrorless cameras at home. Like, they're all kind of morphing together, which is dope for me and it's dope for you because the prices are coming down, hence being able to get this ridiculous RED camera package for this ridiculously low price. So who is this camera for? I think it's for the freelance film filmmaker as an A camera, a high-level production company B camera or crash cam. I personally don't have the money to put this thing on a zip line or an FPV drone or the back of the Batmobile to watch it explode. But you know, if you have that kind of money, you do you. That's what cameras are for. Documentary running gun filmmakers, yes. Content creators, probably not, unless you just want to put in the work and get a super dope image, which is fine. So should you buy it? I don't know. I hope this video helped you figure that out. I want to buy one. To be quite honest, I really want to buy one. But y'all, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a fun one to make. I only got a little bit of time to shoot B-roll of and with the Komodo. I borrowed it from my buddy Aaron over at AR7 Media. Aaron, thanks so much for letting me borrow that. If you enjoyed this video, if it helped you out, hit the like button down below. Like I mentioned earlier, you don't always need lighting for the RED Komodo, but if you are wanting to pick up some lights to make your videos more cinematic and higher quality, check out my last video right here where I run through my budget lighting setup. And if not, I'll see you next time. Thanks y'all, I appreciate you watching. See ya.